Hey folks, welcome to the SquadCast. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing swell. How you doing, Bob?
Well, you're doing better than me, but we're gonna be okay. Um, I went to Denver and it didn't come back well, so we're gonna see how this works out. But we have a great guest tonight. We have Tim Seeley. He's gonna be on the show. We're gonna talk about his amazing career and he is definitely one of the hardest working men in comics. The amount of stuff that he does in comics is just absolutely insane. And we want to talk about that. He also does other things. We have somebody watching, so hi.
Hi, Sherry.
And before we get started, I kind of want to touch on the news of the day. It's not really pop culture news, but it is news, and it's important to me. The Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore is about 10 miles from us, 7 to 10 miles from us. And when my wife told me about it this morning while I was laying in bed, I'm like, oh, I figured it was something like what had happened in Philadelphia in 95. And then I turned on my phone and I looked and I saw the whole bridge just go into the water. And I was, devastated because of the amount of my concern, obviously, for the people who were on the bridge. And, I don't, I feel terrible for for their families. And, we send our heartfelt, good wishes for them. But the other part, and I kind of mentioned this to you, Mike, is the fact of how important that bridge is to the economy of Baltimore and Maryland's industry.
As well as the rest of the nation. That is the port where the majority, or at least a majority, of farm equipment, vehicles, and even regular, cars and stuff. That's where you guys got that,
Well,
and not for a while. You won't.
well, let's hope that no, that it can get repaired well enough, fast enough to, you know, make uh make it functional again, so that we can get keep that industry, because this city cannot afford that type of economic hit.
No,
It is
no.
hanging on by a thread, and it is it's a big concern. So again, our thoughts and prayers. I hate that, but we're definitely thinking about the people who are impacted by this.
I am amazed at the number of friends I have in Baltimore. Now, a lot of that comes from going to the convention, year after year, and everybody enjoying that convention so much. So, my first thought once I got past the oh, the humanities moment, and I don't mean that lightly, was, geez, I hope the convention will be okay.
We will. It'll be fine. It'll be good. I did want to bring up the fact that the Ringo judges jury was announced today, and that's always a fun thing. I think it's a great honor for people to do that. I also think it's a tough job, and some of our friends are on that jury. Bob Greenberger, Jamal Eigel, Sam Maggs, Annie Wu, and I can't remember the last one, but I'm going to remember as soon as I look it up. Um, oh, Alan Gill, who's a comic book retailer, and that's awesome. He runs NC North Carolina Comic Con, which is pretty cool. Um, I think it's a lot of fun for people to have that experience. But again, talking to people who have done that job, it's a tough job. There's a
Oh
lot to
yeah,
read. There's a lot to
you've got
watch. And,
you've got a whole summer's worth of reading right there. I mean, it's just an
yeah,
intense amount of stuff you have to read. Some of which, a lot of which, I think you might not have read before. So it can be a very educational experience. You might
yeah,
not have picked up half of those books.
and
So that's pretty cool, actually.
that's one of the fun things. Is I get in these situations, and people who watch the show know how much I love comics, and how you know one of the things that I've been traveling for day job recently, and when I do that, I kind of grab a whole bunch of books that I haven't read, or that like I'll catch up on a series, and I just freaking love it. There's so much uh good stuff out there. A couple trips ago, I caught up on Local Man. This trip I had last week, I caught up on World Tree and some other things. It's really just people are making good comics and people need to read them, and they are, go find them. We're gonna bring in Tim pretty soon, but one of the things I want people to watch and pay attention to is, we do this thing where we have a little video kind of introducing our guests, and it was hard to leave stuff out from the amount of, and everything that is in the list is so good. It's a good story. It's well designed. It's well drawn. It's well written. I mean, and that's a testament to Tim, but it's also, indicative of people out there who are making good comics, and we need to support that.
Well, once we got out of the American superhero rut that we put ourselves in around early 1960s, it's amazing to see all of the wonderful and beautiful material, heartfelt in many cases, very well told. I can't think of a period of time when we have allowed comics writers to be this interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It is a fun time, and please, anybody out there who's watching, go to your local comic shop and ask them, tell them what you like. There's a book there for you, or hit us up at Pop Culture Squad. We'll tell you what's out there that's good too.
Well, you do this new number ones column on
Yep.
on Pop Culture Squad.
I do,
and that's a good place for people who are looking for something new to look, because
right.
It's number one. So ostensibly, you're getting in on the ground floor.
Right.
Sometimes not, and you don't have like 300 books to read. You just have that.
And some stories are longer. Some stories are 4 issues. Some stories are 5 issues. Sometimes it's not. You don't have to like freak out. One of the things I want to say though, and I like this, is that I found that some indie books, and we use that word affectionately, excuse me, are lasting longer. They're running longer.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage that, and I hope that continues to be a trend. And I hope it's not just James's book. Not that James doesn't make good books, but James's books are really running pretty long. And I think that there's a lot of things that merit that. And also I want to call out that tomorrow, or today, because it's Tuesday, but Batman Dark Age, which is a DC book, but it's a book that we love, is out this week, and that's a new number one. Check that out, because it's Mark Russell and Mike Allred, and it's good. And also Feral comes out this week. And Feral is the book that we had Tony Fleece on a few weeks ago, and we may talk about something else that Tony Fleece works on, but that is coming out tomorrow, and please check those out.
Yeah, I noticed you said you did sort of a double take. You wanted to say that these DC books are out today, being Tuesday. However, some retailers don't open up on Tuesday. They open up on Wednesday when all of the new books are in. And now finally, after a couple of years, DC is going back to Wednesday delivery starting in June.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, so I can see you wanting to say that it's out today, but not everybody goes to the comic book store on Tuesday and Wednesday. So you're going to go there Wednesday.
I am, and my shop does not deliver Tuesday DC books, but I'm glad that they're going back to that, because there's enough pettiness in comics. We don't need DC trying to screw over.
Well, but the crowd, the folks who make the comic books. We can be as petty as you can possibly imagine.
Oh, I know. There's one other thing I kind of want to get to before we bring Tim in. This is something that you got to stay tuned to Pop Culture Squad for. And let me change this out. So I did an interview with Michelle Abinader a couple of weeks ago, and we have hopefully this week the podcast will be out. But this is a crowdfunding book that is just funded. It's she's running it on BackerKit. It's called When I Was Young. It's a group. It's an anthology of stories by LGBTQA plus creators who are, kind of telling, little short stories, working together. It is just funded today. We're very excited about it. I will put the link to it in the comments. I want to encourage people to go check it out. There's some amazing creative teams on here. There's there is the first interiors by Heather Antos is in this book. There's a story by Chris Cantwell, Stephanie Williams. There's just so many really cool creators who are telling very personal stories. So there will be a podcast that you'll see on our YouTube channel later this week that will have that interview where we talk more about it. But I wanted to highlight it while we have the chance here.
You mentioned, the fundraisers. I woke up this morning and got the whole Baltimore story. But once I got past that, I checked my email, and I had 3 emails from Gene Haspel telling me to pony up the money for their Kickstarter for his latest, COVID cop book. And I don't know how I got on his mailing list 3 times, which is fine. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, I am on it a couple of times.
I'd already contributed to that. But it's nice to know that they're being very diligent. It's amazing how many people are using that as a funding resource, and how many big publishers are beginning to do the same thing. And I'm still not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that too, but maybe we can try and dig into that at another time. But like that's something that I question. I don't know how to deal with that. But those are the things I wanted to get at of bringing in Tim, because I do want to bring him in pretty quick. One of the things the last thing I want to say, and we'll hit it one more time. So next week, I believe we're having Ed Cato on. We're going to talk about Ithacon, which is where we're going to be. And we're also going to have Zach Quaintance on, who is going to be launching his Kickstarter, his second Kickstarter that day. So we're going to have a double dose of a couple of cool comic guys on next week. However, we are going to bring Tim Seeley in. It's interesting because I got a notification or a reminder on Facebook that 5 years ago today, I was in Chicago. I was at C2E2. That was the first time I had a press pass to a show. And it was awesome. I interviewed Mike Norton and Rafer Roberts because they were doing Grumble at the time. I interviewed Gene Ha that weekend. I was at a party with Tim Seeley when he announced that he was going to have a baby. So that it was 5 years ago today. So we're going to bring him in right now. Hey,
Hello.
Tim.
Hey,
how are you?
How you doing? Hey, Jeff.
How's it going, Tim?
Hey, good to see you, Mike. You're still in Chicago, right? You're here?
Nope. You are.
All right. And right away from us.
I did 35 years ago, but thanks for noticing.
It's Dick Giordano's fault.
Well, I've seen you here before. You've been here a couple times since.
I go back to Chicago as often as I can. COVID slowed that down a little bit. You and I have run into each other at like stores and appearances and stuff. And I mean, I love my hometown. What can I tell you? Chicago is so rich. And someday we're gonna bore the hell out of the rest of the nation. Have you and Ostrander and a couple of other Chicago guys together and tell some really good stories. Not so much about comics, but about really wacky Chicagoans. We could sell 20 hours of that.
Yeah. Well, because Ostrander, I hung out a couple of times, and he's got Del Close stories. He's got Stuart Gordon stories. He's got all.
Oh yeah, me too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, actually, it's not quite how John and I met, but maybe it is. I went to this party back around 1971 when most people weren't alive. And walking in 1971, they said, "Oh, you're a comic book guy." And I was thinking, well, no, actually, I was on radio in Chicago in those days. But okay, comic book guy, that's fine. I don't mind that. He says, well, why don't you sit over here? We have a couple other people who are real big comic book fans. And I thought, oh, okay, fine. I've been exiled, you know. And
Nerd table.
That's right. And on this couch were three nerds. I made the fourth. And one of them was John. And John and I hit it off immediately. And John was there because his roommate, he was an actor. His roommate was an actor who was in a great many Stuart Gordon productions. And I was on the fringes of the theater scene in those days. I'd already met Del and hung out with Second City people. And that is a friendship that has lasted every minute since then.
Amazing.
Oh, it's wonderful.
No,
it is absolutely wonderful.
It's an amazing friendship to be around the two of them together. It's pretty cool.
I bet, yeah. I was told the other day to my wife about the real Munden's bar. So that's for another time. But I never got to go there because it's gone. But I know that I've heard stories. So someday I want to do one of those Munden's bar runs.
Well, I will keep your name in the Rolodex because hopefully we'll get back to that.
Yeah, we're trying. We're trying really hard. I think that the world should be ready for one more Munden's Bar / Wasteland sort of anthology of new material. And, so many people who were there before would love to do another one. They've told me that. And there are so many newcomers, as in guys who weren't working when we started in the early 80s, who would like to do one. So it's hard to pass that up. It's really hard to pass that up. And we can do just biographical stories of each other. Ooh, that could be scary.
There you go. At least a beer, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of want to start with Local Man. I know we're still going on. But part of my my enticingness of getting you on the show is that we spent 20 minutes talking about the butthole with Tony. So I figured you had an opportunity.
Yes, the butthole. The most expensive butthole in comics history.
Yeah, so like that's crazy, and I've told that story to some other people. Like, how did that, for your experience, and you've been making comics for a long time, especially kind of on your own in a lot of ways. The fact that a printer wouldn't publish, do you have issues with your vault stuff? I mean, that's
absolutely.
So you can't print that in America.
This is absolutely new stuff too, because that was never the problem, and it wasn't until the weird moral backlash, the thing that started with Trump and has continued since, this like big uprise and more, moral backlash, is that suddenly that's an issue. And for the first, couple of years of Money Shot, no problem. And then we started getting that with printers, and then we got it with that Money Shot. I mean, with that Local Man issue. So anytime, people go crazy about some dumb moral backlash bullshit, it inevitably actually impacts some of us financially. So,
So
was it worth it? Sure, I guess it was a good joke, and I'm glad Tony got it in there. But man, yeah, I mean, it just we lost money on that issue initially, which is funny. So just because the butthole.
Oh yeah, if you haven't offended your printer eventually in your career, you're not doing your job.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing too is, then you got to you got to print in Quebec or something, which is doable. But it's really shocking that you can get away with more in China than you can.
Oh yeah,
printer in in Georgia or something. Which and again, because of comics has gotten so specialized with printing too, that has also become part of the problem. There isn't as many available printers. I mean, Mike, you could attest to that. There isn't as many as there. There used to be. The ones that are there tend to be cheaper because that's what they do now. They don't do a lot of other stuff. Printing is, obviously become less of a big industry as it was. So, but yeah, and thank you. They'll take the tizzy, but yeah, it's all very interesting. It's always educational, and now like when I do something, I'm always sort of weighing what's the value, and something like Money Shot where we've got time. It's not as big of a deal, but it's those last second things that really get you because we thought we were fine, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you've got to take this to another printer. You've got a day to find somebody, and they can quote you whatever the price they want. So like,
sure,
and that's kind of the problem that we ended up having with it.
I'll tell you how an incident like that really helped the publication I was working for. And this is a very long time ago. The great Mike Royko, who is just one of the greatest newspapermen, columnists, writers in American history, influenced more people than you can possibly imagine. He was writing a daily column, and I think it was being published in the Chicago Daily News in those days. And he wrote this column about the service that the Chicago Seed was involved with. The Seed was called an underground newspaper. Our circulation, I think, maxed at about 48,000. So I'm not exactly sure how underground we were. But, you had to go to head shops and places like that to find it. It wasn't exactly like your corner newsstand. And Royko wrote this scathing column about this service, which helped link people up, hippies, up with employment. I couldn't quite understand what his problem was. And then 2 weeks later, the Chicago Tribune bought our printer and dropped us. The Tribune was very right-wing. Now it's just nothing. But then it was very right-wing. And they dropped us. And that pissed Royko off, and I understand why. And he wrote this scathing column about what assholes the Tribune company
Yeah.
was. And that, of course, attracted readers. We got a lot of readers off of that all over the country because Royko was syndicated. So it really helped us a lot. And the funny thing is, the Daily News went out of business. It got absorbed into the Sun Times. Marshall Field owned it. He had to sell it because his brother was an asshole. Rupert Murdoch bought it, and Royko quit.
Yeah.
He would not work for Rupert Murdoch, and sort of what's going on at MSNBC right now. And by quitting, he had to take his column over to the Tribune. It was the only place left. It was the only other newspaper left in town. So he wound up working for 10 years, last 10 years of his life, for the Chicago Tribune, a company that he cut him a new asshole for dropping the Seed. So I figured, and I was like 18 at the time, so I figured like, hey, I've already made my mark, and then I went into doing underground comics.
That's awesome. I kind of want to talk about things like like the joke, like the way Tony kind of explained it to us was that like he had this idea and he kind of went back and forth, and then he was like, "Well, everybody's gonna think it was Seeley's idea, and I get to do it, so you
Like,
know, right?" And I'm like, "Well, I totally thought it was Seeley's idea." So,
oh, mine was so yeah, but that's the way
but
it has to work. Is that by design? It's sort of a amalgamation, and so. And I don't, when Tony did it, I didn't say, "Oh shit, we'll get." I don't think I said we'll get in trouble.
right,
Like, I think I said something to the effect of like, "I don't know if it's worth it, but it's pretty funny. Let's just do it,"
oh, it
which
was
is
great.
my go to. And then should have been like, "No, it wasn't worth it." But
Well,
in the end, I think the book has to have like a certain kind of texture, and that adds to it, and it also has to have a sort of kind of improv feel to it to some degree, and I think that kind of stuff keeps that vibe. So,
that issue is that the issue where he walks through the next
the one before, so thank
that's the one
God.
before. So, well, so I mean, I had a conversation with somebody. Actually, it was Adam Phillips, uh, who's formerly of DC Comics and currently doing PR for a bunch of other people. He was at AWA, but we were talking the other day, and he was like, he absolutely loved that walkthrough, and I agree. I thought it's so smart. Some of the things you guys are doing there, and I don't want to spoil the whole thing because I want people to go out and read Local Man. There's a part where in each book there's a front story that's kind of like the main story that we're going on. And then it's a flip book. Every book is a flip book. So you flip it over, and then there's like a flashback to classic 80s image, hardcore, stuff. And that particular issue, the one before the butthole, which I think is like 8 and the butthole's 9, something like that, or 7 or 8. There's a piece that you have to go see because it really is some smart comic book telling, especially with the way you guys have set that up. So.
Yeah, I mean, and so the idea for the backups was that the original, sort of first couple years of Image books would have a flip story in it, ostensibly to promote somebody else's story. We used it as sort of the idea that it would be, these were sort of filling in parts of the story that you didn't see. But we just loved. They used to call them extra image, and that was so charming that we wanted to put that in there. But then Tony had the idea of like at some point the story should link together, and then over time it literally became that someone walked from one scene to the other one.
Yeah, it was great. It was absolutely great.
It's comics as a medium was one of the first to really break down the wall.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure why that became so attractive in comics, but you could do it in comics when you couldn't do it in any other medium.
Right. Yeah, and mostly just because there's no one to stop you.
Right.
Right. You're still in control of this stuff on a level of which you don't get to do on other stuff. But I mean, and part of our thinking going back to that was that we kept hearing from comic shops that part of the problem with modern comic retail is that trades have become so reliable and easy to get and priced well, and that there's a whole generation of people that just wait for the trade. They don't buy them monthly, and there's a lot of readers that are happy just to be people who go to a bookstore and buy their trades, and they don't need the monthly stuff. So part of our thing was we can do something here that we couldn't do in the trade. It's not going to work as well. It'll be a surprise. We want to solicit it. It was like retailers, we're going to do something for you. I promise. It's only something you do in a monthly comic. But they weren't that excited about it, even though we're like, it's for you.
Yeah.
I think now, maybe because the book, the numbers have kind of ticked up a little bit. So I feel like maybe people are kind of seeing what we're doing. And
well, I'm hoping that it's us talking about it. So let's keep doing it.
Right. That's right. That's right.
But it also has to just be that it takes so long, now building a buzz on a book just takes significantly longer than it used to. I mean, you used to be able to sort of, what is Sandman around issue 7, I think it starts kicking up, and the Invisibles and all these sort of earlier books, like critically acclaimed books, would sort of catch on, 5, 6, 7 or whatever. And now you've got to get retailers to get behind you for 12 issues before they start to feel comfortable, which is it's a huge risk for the creators, obviously, to stay with something that but I feel like maybe it's coming around. So thank you everybody. But yeah, it is a perilous industry at the moment, just because there's that weird spot between monthlies and trades, and how everybody's just sort of comfortable to just wait and not, sort of jump onto stuff, means some stuff never gets those trades.
Well, the worst thing that happened to the comic book medium in America was Hitler killing himself. Everybody before that was selling great. If you had the paper, you were selling hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies. Poor Bob just got that. And
I was sick. I told you.
I know.
It was good. It was good. And now I have to go and edit shit.
It's been on the ropes ever since, and everybody says, well, comics are going to die soon. This was true in the late 40s. Of course, we had Frederick Wortham to help us with that. It was true in the 50s. It's true when all the newsstands started to disappear, starting in the 60s. What we need to remember is that when the comic shop owner is going through the catalogs, and now we burden them with a bunch of them, they're literally betting the rent on their orders. Literally, if they screw up bad, they're out of business. On the other hand, if they don't order enough and they screw up bad, they might lose customers.
So,
yeah,
it's a terrifying spot to be in.
But I always think of the late 90s, early 2000s, whatever. People are ordering shit tons of stuff, and now you've got to just drag those orders. It's such a bummer to be on the why didn't I make this book in fucking 1994?
Right. So Mike, when first you were doing First, you guys wholly embraced the direct market, right? And you had been there for when you were at DC and stuff like that. But how was that different from when you were dealing with people in your retailer stuff in the late 90s and stuff like that?
When we were at First, it dawned on me after a while that Marvel and DC were scared shitless that we would go to the newsstands, and I could never figure out why. Because you
were making good comics.
Well, thank you. But the fact of the matter is, you print 3 or 4 for every one that you actually sell. Now, I have ecological reasons why that bothers me, but financially, that's stupid. That's just a stupid model, and we wouldn't have the vast array of stories that we have today, and such talented and gifted creators who could provide those stories, who want to tell those stories, if not for the fact that we've had this direct market. It allowed us to catch up to the rest of the world in terms of the width and the breadth of the stories we can tell. So I'm a big believer in the direct market, but I'm really glad that the bookstore market has come around, because the direct market is just not stable enough, never has been, for the reasons that you just mentioned.
Right. I mean, I kind of want to talk about this, and I want to move on, because I don't want to sit here and have a funeral. But kind of part of the thing is, there's something that is a trend in comics right now, and Tim, you've been part of it. There's this kind of nostalgia comics, the stuff you've done with Masters of the Universe and Masters of the Multiverse, and even you did Lost Boys and stuff like that. The cartoons that are turning into comics again, Thundercats, Space Ghost, G.I. Joe, and what they're doing with Transformers. They're great books. They're all really good.
Transformers is the best-selling book out there right now.
It's really good. It's really good. But
I've done it twice. I did it back in.
Yeah, you did it with G.I. Joe back in the day,
and then I did it with He-Man this time.
Yeah. So how do you do you think that there, from your perspective as a writer, I mean, it's, you don't own those properties, there's other people's properties, but do you think that that's something that there's, excuse me, some economic viability in for comics?
Well,
or are we just circling the drain?
No, I can't help but notice how cyclical it is and why it's cyclical, because in part, so when we did G.I. Joe, Devil's Due got the rights to G.I. Joe 2001, that book came out, and a big part of the reason I think it surged was that at the time, the Marvel DC weren't exactly putting on stuff that was exciting everybody, but people wanted to buy comics, and then there was this sort of like, that was that first surge of people who were kids when, in the 80s, and they suddenly had disposable income. So retailers were big on those things, and they were rewarded, and they were collectible, right? Because they were multiple covers and all that stuff. And 20 years later, damn near on the dot, it happens again. And part of it's the same stuff. I guess it's a little surprising it's not things like, obviously Power Rangers and things that from the 90s, and then some of that stuff has gone through it. But part of it is it's the same people, and they're going through this thing again as readers where they're not super excited about what Marvel and DC are putting out, and they want to get some comics. And so it's perfect timing, and so it's the same properties this time. It's a little bit of it does indicate to me that means that we don't have a lot of people like who were kids, in the early 2000s or even the mid 2000s. That's
right.
That's not great.
Like, why isn't there a Ben 10 comic or something like that?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Why wasn't there one? Yeah.
Well,
that. Like, as a retro property, I totally agree. I do think part of it is, the things that those people were into still exist, but they're manga and they're at the bookstore. So, like, that's part of the problem. I mean, I don't think it's like a great thing for. It's not a great indicator. It just means that we're not bringing in new people, and we haven't for a while. At least on this side of the business, I think comics brings in tons of people, but they're going to. I mean, you could do now a nostalgia thing, and this is how crazy things are. But you could do now the nostalgia things for people who got into this stuff in the 2000s would be The Walking Dead or Saga or Hack Slash or right. Those are the mainstream things.
Right. Or Spider-Man 2099 or
even like, later. I mean, you're talking like, yeah, I mean, and it's even so part of the, and I teach at college, so I can tell you their nostalgia for stuff is sated basically, right? Like those things are always available. Like you can always get Walking Dead at the bookstore. You can always get Naruto. You can always get, My Hero Academia and One Punch Man. So like, it's a different sort of thing, and the pop culture fandom of that kind of stuff is just a different is in a different place. So like it's mildly concerning that maybe the best selling comic of the year will be Thundercats. I would be worried about it if I were a comic shop. But on the other hand, like they did a good book. It's not like it's a slack book, so and I don't know, I worked at Master Universe, kind of different because it has a current animated show, so it's a little different. But like Transformers G.I. Joe is I mean, they're putting out, like you said, it's a great series of books. They're all good. And like the part that confuses me is that Joe and Transformers didn't go away. Like, it's not like, I mean, IDW had those books, and there were those books a year ago. I mean, it's like, but people,
they weren't good though. They were good. They were
just very fanny. I liked the Transformers book quite a lot, but they were very fan-y. And I think that was part of the problem. But, it does sort of, it's the confusing thing about this one is it's not like the books, people were clamoring for those properties. Thundercats, you could say that because it hasn't been around for a while. But Transformers, that was 2 weeks ago, right? It's like,
right.
It's so that part of it is very, it's concerning, but I also like good books are good books, like, so I have to be able to sort of, sort of save myself with that idea.
We've always had a problem attracting a broader audience. Again, since the end of World War II, the audience has grown with us. So that whereas back in the 50s, your average comic book reader was like an 8-year-old, and in the 80s, by the your average comic book reader was probably in his 20s or even 30s. Now I'm beginning to look at. The distributors didn't want to handle comics for kids because kids didn't spend enough money in the comic book store and they were more of a pain in the ass. Okay, I get that, but who's going to be buying your comics 10 years from now? Maybe the YA books that are being done today, the comics. Hi, the comics.
Hi, Valentina.
Hope you're not in AFTRA.
Don't worry. She's going to be doing Transformers in about 8 years.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, less. Maybe those YA books, some of which are outselling, comic books, are going to bring us that next generation of readers. I'm always concerned about that, but I've been concerned about that for 3 generations now.
Yeah, it always shakes out. I mean, and my college kids all read comics. They just don't read Batman, and they don't read. I mean, if they do, they're not reading the monthly Batman, or they don't read, Fantastic Four or something like. They read trades from Barnes and Noble, and they read Saga and manga and stuff. So like, comics is cool and probably has the biggest readership it's ever had if you count webtoons and all those things, which I do. It's just that
Right.
It's just the other side of it is, it is a little weird that we're sort of in another 80s nostalgia bubble, but I can't say shit because I've worked in it 2 times. So,
Right. I mean, and one of the other things is, like, you've done stuff that's digital only or digital first, at least. That's a factor in how we're, consuming things, there is the concept of the standard, page format that we have, that comic books have. And then there's the scroll format from webtoons and stuff like that. But like, as somebody who is constantly, trying to find a foothold and trying to find a way to reach new readers, what is where do you think we are with that right now?
I mean, digital is weird because it hits such a hard wall. I mean, there was this sort of, it was just every year it was like going up, and if you had a book on Comixology for those first 10 years, you were just like, I can't fucking believe this. But then it hit this real hard, just impenetrable wall, and I think part of it was the saturation of this is as many iPads as people are going to have, and I think that's part of it. And then and then Comixology, they just fucked up. Amazon fucked that up so bad that it's completely unusable.
Right.
So it had its moment, and it hasn't been replaced. And Webtoon is such it's such an amazing platform, but it's also like, it started out probably as like the best place you could be, but now it's become sort of like everything else, where there's a billion people competing for your attention, and only a few end up making money on it. And so, I think it's that kind of stuff is making comic book readers. And if the goal was just to get people into comics, Webtoons did it. They win, right? That is the success story of the last 10 years for sure. And the amount of people, I mean, you take a bus in Chicago and you will see a third of the people under 30 reading comics while they're on the phone, while they're on the bus. Amazing. But turning those people into like a paying customer for other stuff, I think that's a challenge, and I don't think Marvel and DC have figured out how to do that yet.
They might have if they had one owner for any length of time that actually thought that there was a future in comic book publishing. And I'm not certain there is.
No, I mean, I get the royalties. I know how much money those things make. They know how much DC pays for itself off Watchmen. I mean, the whole office is paid for off royalties of Watchmen sales. So like, they know there's money in it, but I think there's a as a publisher level, you're trying not to fuck with the things that make the big money, which is licensing and film. So, you're sort of in a position where they don't want you to go away, but they don't want you to be a problem. So, the moment like Batman's dick shows up in a Batman book, you are now more trouble than you're worth, right? As far as the value of this enterprise that you do. So, I think, comics from the corporate level, Marvel and DC, the position you're in is these make money, but if we do something wrong, we're fucked. So innovation is not going to be a big push, right? You don't want to offend some some mom in Alabama, and Fox News gets on your ass, and now it's bad. It's just bad tension for you. So I think the corporate comics are stuck in a weird spot, and that's why you don't see like big pushes from them. You see them sort of like, hey, we're good, we're happy where we are.
Yeah. You don't see creators wanting to give their creations away to Discovery or to Disney. You just don't want to do that.
I think we would if you felt like there was. I would, but I think there's also the sort of like you'd want to feel like it wasn't just going to disappear. I think so much of the stuff I've done for DC is just, no matter what, it's just like it got rebooted and, you know what I mean? Like, and
right.
Like Hack Slash is going 20 years and I still print that first book all the time. And so like the idea, I guess, that, there's not evergreens like they used to in those kind of comics, whereas for like a creator owned book like Image, having these evergreens, they are my living. Like this house that I am in was bought by those Hack Slash
right
those reprints of all those years. So
20 years.
Yeah. And I think that's like it's really hard to think of how many DC books that are still reprinted after 20 years. Not that many. I mean, they by design, they'd sort of churn and replace and even like Nightwing Rebirth, which I did, I think was the highest selling thing I've ever done. Like, it's now there's going to be another Nightwing Rebirth, right? So
sure.
Is there really?
I mean,
I'm sure,
I do. I'm sure there is. I mean, I do want you to know that that cover, that Javi Fernandez cover, is on my backsplash from my desktop and my phone and everywhere.
Yeah, it's so great, and
it is.
And I was lucky to get involved in those sort of things, and I would never, so honored that I got to do it. And great, I love the royalties on that. It was lovely, but it is like a thing. I think when you contribute something to Marvel DC now, as a creator, you have to sort of be like, well, what's the long term on this? Are they going to contribute to it as well, or are they going to just churn it out? And maybe it's Marvel's gotten a lot better about reprinting stuff, thank God. But like there was years there where they wouldn't warehouse anything, so you do something and it just sort of disappears into the ether. And for us, like your royalties, your reprints, like all that stuff are kind of what keep you, in the game. So
right.
We just went back to press on a couple of revival books. Like
that's great.
That's a 15-year-old or 13-year-old book, right? So, it's just a different sort of business to have your own things and to make those decisions, and also not to sort of have to replace yourself in a weird way where, DC and Marvel have to do that. They have to like overwrite and replace all these books they made. And when Nightwing Rebirth came out, it overrode and replaced a Chuck Dixon books. And so, right? Like I've done it.
And it
will do to me.
And it overrode and replaced Grayson. To be honest with you.
Yeah, my own fucking book. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean,
you can actually put yourself out of business while you're trying to stay in business. It's weird. It's a weird feeling, but excuse me. And at least they're paying attention, to the remarketing on those trade paperbacks, and that is where they're going to live. The problem, financially, the problem is the worst Marvel DC movie had probably made more money than all of the comic books Marvel or DC published that year.
I don't know, man. The movies, I doubt it actually, because even if they made the money, they put so much into it. What they like about the comics is how little they put into it. I mean,
sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
You have to be making movies to see the world that way. You have to be making $250 million movies to say, "Oh, comics, they're cheap to produce." They're not cheap to produce.
No, I mean, having worked on both sides of these, and having worked in film a little bit, and having the returns on film are actually not that great. Like the amount of films that make a decent amount of money it's pretty low. And if you had a burgeoning comic line with multiple successes, I mean, you'd rather have comics than a couple of films, and one of which bombed or something. Like
that's what Marvel's going through now.
Right.
And we'll have to see what happens. The situation though is much more complicated, and I don't want to bore everybody to death.
We are definitely in the weeds, but it's good stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact is there are so many revenue streams coming in off of movies, particularly these days. You have a billion streaming services, and you got cable, and you got home video, and you got all of this stuff. If you're expecting to make your $250 million back, opening weekend, which too many of them do expect,
they need to.
Yeah, you're in for a surprise, because not all of them are going to do that, and then we're going to have something like COVID, which will just screw the whole thing up anyway.
Right. Yeah.
I
want to say I'm still waiting for the effigy trade reprint. So we need that.
I mean, that's an interesting one too, because there is the downside of giving an idea to Marvel DC,
right?
Because I was under exclusive, and it's great. I was well taken care of, and I had insurance. I loved it. Wasn't going to complain. But a book like that or Imaginary Fiends, like it's creator owned, it's mine. But I did it with DC, and they determine when or if we do anything with it. So
right,
for both of those things, they briefly went through periods where they were shopping it for movies or TV. But both of them went through a thing where they were developing something similar enough that they're like, we're going to, and you just have a sort of, one of them goes, one of them doesn't. And and then you sort of just end up with, oh man, if I was at Image, I would have fucking reprinted both those things by now, right? Like,
exactly.
But it's just like, but the job now is sort of a balancing act. And obviously, DC was great to me, and they paid for a whole bunch of shit, so I can't complain too loudly. But I mean, if I had the opportunity to take those back, I would republish them, and I would do them, and I would get them in front of more people, and I would make money on it. I mean, that's what I would do. Imaginary Fiends, I could easily sell at Image. I know I could, but yeah, it's a tough game.
He cut his mic off because he was coughing.
All right.
Yeah, that's how we do that. We try and keep everybody's ears intact. So Hack Slash, I want to talk about that just a little bit. Like next week, there's a reprint of the thing you did like 2 years ago. Was that what it is with the Image 30 thing?
A book called Image 30, which was an anthology series. There were six-page Hack Slash stories, of which they let me use the original Image debut characters. So,
did you do this cover?
I did.
That's great.
So Eric let me use Super Patriot, and Rob let me use Cabot, and Jim let me use Shadowhawk. And then it's just sort of like, it was kind of a primer in a weird way for Local Man, because like a lot of the stuff that we kind of ended up doing with it, I was like, oh, I went over this ground a little in this previous book. But yeah, it's so that they let me do I saw a cat's ass go in front of the
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get some cat butthole at some point. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, then they let me do a reflected version of it, because obviously for an anthology, not everybody that reads books and that stuff. So. And so Rob and Eric and Jim let me have permission to reprint their characters. God bless them. So
that's awesome. And that comes out next week. So people should go check that out.
I wrote it and did the layouts, and then Stefano Caselli, the original Hack Slash co-creator and artist of a bunch of Marvel stuff, he did finishes on it. So it was like a reunion of the OGs.
So Mindy's watching.
Got hit on by Mindy Newell.
I'm saying Mindy's watching, and it's funny because Mindy, I was talking about her like a few days ago on Twitter, because somebody had posted the book she did for Dark with Eclipse, and talking about how much I loved it. I think it was Alex Segura, somebody like that. So thank you, Mindy. You were awesome.
What? Yeah, I have Mindy's stuff for sure.
Mindy's awesome.
Yeah.
Mindy is one of the most underrated writers in comics.
Absolutely.
And Lord knows everybody I know, including me, has tried to get her back in.
We did Vamps, which was one of my favorites of the '90s Vertigo stuff. That's some good shit.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, there you go. Vertigo
I don't
books.
know if she was talking about that or she's talking about the Eclipse book. But I do have a copy of it that I'm waiting for her to sign. Anyway, thanks for watching, Mindy. I have a kind of a weird question, and it's related to your career in comics. And like I said, I became aware of Tim Seeley with Hack Slash. So I started reading that, and I'm like, this guy's good. And then when I saw you other places, I'm like, oh, I like this guy. So, what's been the biggest surprise that you have had in a positive way with comics?
Oh, I mean, I have so much positive stuff in comics. I think the craziest stuff, I clip shit, and I do mean shit. I think that the biggest surprise always is what is the real mainstream, I guess, because when you're in this, when you're here, the way that people talk about stuff like mainstream comics are, monthly Marvel and DC stuff, but when you get out into the world or when you encounter people who aren't part of this sort of Wednesday Warrior thing, it's like you realize how much it's the opposite, right? Like the mainstream is the non-superhero books, which makes sense because the rest of the world is sort of based around all kinds of different genres. Why would a thing be dominated by just this one genre for so long? But yeah, that always kind of heartens me because even just like hanging out, I'm not hanging out like having a cigarette and a drink or something, but with college kids is always just like the things that they read or the things that they're into are always the ones that in the rest of the world, in the comics world, we call indie book or something. So they're always like, they love Hellboy or they're super into Scott Pilgrim or, Saga's a big one and all this stuff. And those are things we would call indies here. And they are the real mainstream. That's the rest of the world is getting their comics through those things. And I think it's heartening and it kind of ascribes a certain amount of, the things that going back to the first comics days, what Mike was trying to do and people who started Image Comics and people who started Pacific Comics and all those things back was always that knowledge that this shouldn't be this way. And there are other genres that the rest of the world would like. So that, and just having an indie slasher horror comic with lots of underwear shots and shit and gore, have it be the most successful thing I've ever done is a shock and amazing, right? Like, so I never complain when I know that's not only a possibility, but it's been my life for the last 20 years.
I've always flinched when I hear the phrase indie comics, independent comics.
Sure.
And that's because when we were doing First Comics and Eclipse and Pacific and all the others, they, meaning the comics media, started referring to us as indies. What they meant was not DC or Marvel, and that was a much bigger deal back then. Nonetheless, that meant that Archie was an independent comic book publisher, and they're not.
Right.
And Disney Comics,
even
though it was being run by Len Wein and Marv Wolfman for a while, Disney's not independent. Right. Obviously, less so today. So I never liked the phrase, except for the fact that it indicates what I always wanted out of this medium, which is the growth of storytelling, the ability to tell stories. I have no problem with superhero stories. I love them. I love a good superhero story. Nightwing, one of my favorite characters these days. Love it. But there's so much more.
Yeah.
And in America, we couldn't do that until, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I love superheroes too. My office is full of superheroes. But the idea that it's what defines this medium is way out of date. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not accurate to everybody's experience.
And I think it always has been.
Yeah,
I think that there's been a conception about what comics are supposed to do, and we're always like one generation behind reality. The Image is one generation behind.
Yep, agreed.
What? Okay, so here this is something that if people don't know, and I'm gonna take advantage of some stuff here. You live in a super creative family. How do you think that is something you use for creative inspiration? Because you, like, as I said earlier, the amount of books that I put in that little video, I mean, they're all good, and some of them are not seen enough. Like, you're constantly coming up with ideas. There's always, it doesn't go another like couple of months before there's a new Tim Seeley idea that's genuinely good. So is it where you are? Is it something you've always been part of? And God.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, it's so I think another testament to comics is, I'm a guy from a small town in central Wisconsin, and I got two brothers, and my parents, my dad is a welder, my mom was a secretary at a security company. Like, it's not like we, the fact that you could still like get away into comics, and then my brother is a fine artist and he does comic stuff.
I just want to say this is
go
follow Steve Seeley.
And my sister-in-law is Jenny Frizen, who's a pretty well-known comic cover artist. Some of her earliest work was Hack Slash and Revival. So like, the fact that you can do that in comics is sort of a testament to how friendly, I guess, on a budget and on a limited amount of means that the medium is, right? Like, that you can make a comic, you can be some guy from small town Wisconsin with a pencil and a no scanner, just a copy machine, and so and that's how I got into this stuff, and so that part of it I think is so great, and I'm lucky too because I have the support of my family. No one told me not to do it, which sometimes I'm like, you should have told me not to do it. You should have told me to be a doctor or some fucking thing. But no one did, and and they were always supportive. And so I think, like, with the right attitude, and then just the luck of a good family and the luck of a good idea or two, and some hard work, like you can make stuff in comics. And my wife, Paula,
I just want people to go follow her on Instagram because she's amazing, and I'm going to run through this quick because we need to do that. But it's fantastic. Yeah. She's a great artist. So yeah, absolutely.
You said central Wisconsin. Whereabouts?
I'm from near Wausau, which is So
I did a couple comic book store appearances in Wausau.
Really? Yeah. There. I don't think that you ever came when I was shopping for comics there because we didn't have store for a few years, but we got one in the 1989, I believe, 1988, I believe we first got one back. And so that was a huge thing, and getting the sort of having that community. I used to bike to the comic book store. This is not a joke because I put it in Local Man 1. I used to bike 15 miles from my house to go get my Image books. True story. So, like, was that kind of, out of nowhere place, but support and family and stuff. And so I think it's just a testament to comics that you can do that. I mean, if anybody who's listening to this and anybody in any small town, and I have all these college kids that I can tell you that's true, they'll just be like, well, how do I do this? And I just say, here's a pencil and here's paper and go do it. And it's doable.
Yeah, it's true. I'm a North Side boy. So when I was growing up, my friends and I would every Saturday take a walk down Devon Avenue. There were 7 different places within a 1 mile stretch that sold comics.
Well, that's awesome.
One of them was a bike store that sold them out of a box, and they were all Charltons. We understand where that came from. But there was only superhero stuff, and I was thrilled. As a kid, I loved it. But then we fell across Creepy #1. And Creepy #1 was a very good comic book, and it was very different, and it was very well illustrated. But by issue maybe 3, Archie Goodwin had taken over, and Archie said, "This, what I want to do is make this a contemporary version of EC Comics." Archie was a big EC fan, as was Jim Warren, and that changed everything. And it was just one book. I mean, okay, then they had Eerie and Blazing Combat, which is the best of the bunch. But one publisher doing one book changed my entire attitude about comics. And that's one of the reasons why my friends and I would just make that walk every week to hit every one of those stores and then go back to one of our, apartments and sit there and read. That's how I got into comics. Well, that and being born with a comic book in my hand helped.
Well, it's one thing I found really interesting of late was I work at Columbia teaching comics class, and I have all these students who were like, "Well, where do you get comics anymore?" Because they know about trades, obviously, and webtoons and stuff. But I started recommending people go, because Chicago's full of flea markets, like really good flea markets. And there's like the one in Wheaton that's all night, and there's all these like crazy, just pop up flea markets and stuff like that. And so I took some of the students there, and I was delighted by how into they were like, "Wait, you just do?" And then they're like, "What? And they're like pulling all this stuff and like finding like a run of some book, and they're like, "What, $1 a piece? Are you shitting me?" And just like watching that delight come back around. Because it was sort of lost. I mean, just to some degree, because if you don't have that aspect, you just read comics online and stuff. And you may love them, and trades, obviously, a great way to get them. But there's no version of this with trades, right? There's no
right. No
hunt for comics and the joy of finding something great in good shape and all that sort of stuff. I saw it like reignited, and you have to be in a certain kind of place that has that kind of stuff, which Chicago is full of junk stores and flea markets and thrift stores and vintage toy shops and all that kind of stuff. And so that also re-heartened me to some degree that there's that stuff doesn't go away. Like that delight is still there.
And one of the things, and I don't know, one of the things is shows are from what I've seen, the couple shows I've been to this year, they're packed. So I expect C2E2 to be a mess.
I agree.
It could be a mess without being packed.
No, I understand. I'm hoping in good ways. But one of the things that I find interesting is certain shows that definitely cater to the celebrity experiences that are nominally comic book shows are becoming more and more. There are more retailers there. There are more wholesalers there. There are more, even though they're not, at the level of some other things. So I'm hoping for that. And regarding the flea market, I remember there's a canon moment in my life where there was a flea market. It was an indoor flea market that we, I was staying with my dad, and I took my sister, and I'm like, we're going to ride our bikes down to this flea market, this indoor flea market, and get comics. Excuse me. And then it was like 6 miles, and we were like, I was like 14, so she was 13, and a lot of it getting there was downhill, so a lot of it getting back was uphill. And she will tell you about this to this day, how much she hated me for that. Like, we didn't get all the way up. We had to stop, go back to a friend's house, and wait for my dad to come out of work to pick her up. Let me tell you, it was, because there was some good. I'm sure I got some X-Men's in there, some burn X-Men's that day and stuff like that, which I'm now recollecting.
You see, Tim and I grew up in the flatlands.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to worry about that. Although there was a mountain there near you in central Wisconsin, but not that much of a mountain.
Yeah, no. You don't have to ride. You don't have to bike that thing if you don't want to.
So
it's fun. Your timing is all off, Bob. So
well, that's good,
because you can't breathe. So
exactly. So what's coming next? I know there's some stuff that maybe hasn't been announced or not announced. What's going on with you guys? With you coming?
Yeah.
Next?
Well, so this week, tomorrow we have Local Man Bad Girls is out, right?
Yep. I like the concept of the one shots.
Yeah, I don't know if it. I think it works because it's sort of like a hey, you can come in and check this out, and then you can check out the other ones, but it's not a full trade worth of stuff. So I hope that works, and I'm really happy with Bad Girls. I think we figured out a thing with that one, and then I have I'm working on a YA book that's 300 pages. I'm drawing that right now. That's
Wow.
really keeping me busy. And
Who's
then
that with? Can you say who that's with?
yeah, Simon Schuster,
Okay.
and
Ah,
I'm drawing that, not writing it. So we're gonna see if that was a mistake or not. And then let's see what else am I working on. Oh, Deathstalker from Vault. That was with Slash from Guns N' Roses and
Oh,
Steve
right. I saw that.
and Jim Terry, and that'll be coming out in April. And that's sort of sequel, requel to the original films, and it's a prequel to the next film that Steve Kostanski's doing. And let's see what else I got going on. Let me just check. I have to do this to check my schedule. There we go. Oh, I'm doing a thing for Marvel that's not announced. I'm doing a thing for DC that's not announced, but I have another. I did with Kelly Jones. I did Batman Brave and the Bold. We did a
Mhm.
Nightwing Deadman's series, 4 issues. It's issues
Ooh,
13, 14, 15, and 16 in Batman Brave and the Bold.
that's
Uh,
nice.
it's a horror story starring Nightwing. It's sort of a haunted America. They're on the rails, riding the rails
With Dead
together.
Man. That's perfect.
Yeah, recreating the old circus trails. I got to do
Nice.
a bunch of research on circus tragedies, of which there are many. Uh,
oh yeah. There's one huge one up by where I live in Connecticut. And there was one up in like Danbury a couple decades ago, and everybody died, and they were all buried in this one cemetery, and it's really interesting.
I referenced that one in the story. I didn't try to get too into it because I don't want to do too much real stuff. But yes, crazy stuff in circuses. So that's coming out. And then another DC thing, and then and a big retro nostalgia thing that hasn't been announced that is in the vein of all the things we talked about before at the beginning of the show. So that's why I'm definitely not talking shit about that stuff. But yeah,
And
but
he's wearing a Tila shirt, right?
I'm really
Yeah.
happy with it. Really fun working with a frequent collaborator. So as soon as I can, that is one thing lately too, is that this is the most delayed I've ever had like announcements be in my career. I've had like,
And
I
why do you
mean,
think that is?
I do not know. I cannot figure that. I guess it's sort of now people are more concerned about coordinating this with like streaming stuff and everything, which has an unpredictable schedule. So like when you were, if you had to coordinate something with like a seasonal TV show,
Sure.
you know, pretty easy to do. But now streaming stuff is like always all over the place. It doesn't have a fixed schedule. So I think that's why. And I
But
guess one that I'm doing for DC
we
is
talked about something like 3 months ago, and it still hasn't been announced from DC. You were doing DC.
Oh,
yeah,
sure, that happens. Bob, I'm sure you feel the same way as I do. And if not, you'll lie just to make me look good.
That's true.
But uh, I don't think there's ever been a time in my entire career with comics as a fan and as a professional where I've been aware of more unannounced projects than right now. Projects that are really happening, but they want to time it right, which is good. That's promotion's important. So yeah, Tim, you're right. It's
It's
really kind
hard
of weird.
because I want to talk about them.
It used to be, somebody who would come up to you and say, "Well, what's happening in next month's Spider-Man?" And that was it. They'd run with that for a week.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, part of it is, probably most of us are working on more projects than in the past, but yeah, it is surprising. But I do have, they will happen, and it took almost 2 years for that Nightwing Deadman stuff to get going.
Well, I'm sure your collaborator is
Yeah,
definitely
Kelly was waiting to make sure Kelly was free and ready to go, so that's part of it. And then we just had to like find the right slot, for stuff,
Mhm.
anthology books and stuff. So
that
uh,
looks. I'm excited about that.
yeah, and you obviously Kelly, big time Deadman guy, uh,
Yeah,
but he hadn't really worked on Nightwing before, so he did some cool. His Nightwing is really cool. I'm
cool.
super excited about it, and obviously for me, that's an artist I was a huge fan of as a kid. Going back to actually some um, some of the what's the not raw comics. He did a bunch of horror comics here in Chicago that Andrew Rebb published. Going back way back to then, I was a Kelly Jones guy. So cool stuff, and I was happy to work with that guy.
Yeah, I again, so like that's the concept. Like I picked up those Dead Man's a year or so ago at LA Comic Con. There was a day, and these people had like a box of like 2 boxes of books. They were all like early 90s like DC and Image stuff and Vertigo stuff, and it was five for $1, and which is ridiculous.
Jesus,
it was ridiculous. But like
yeah.
The best part about that story is that when I did that, in there was Sandman Mysteries or Sandman Mystery Theater #1, and I took it over to Shelley Bond.
Yeah,
I took it over to Shelley Bond to get her to sign it. She's like, "Oh well, I'm not." I'm like, "No, you're listed as assistant editor in it. Sign it." And she's like, "I'm like, I just picked it up for like 20 cents." And she's like, "Wait a minute." And then we spent an hour going through like long boxes and 50 cents and 25-cent books. Her and I just like, "Oh, get this. Oh, get this." And then I'm like, "Listen, I am in LA. I didn't bring enough, stuff to take back." She's like, "Just get whatever you want and I'll mail it to you." I'm like, "All right." Right. A couple weeks later, I got a nice big box from Shelley Bond. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that really early Sandman stuff and Kelly's stuff with Mike Barron on Dead Man, like that stuff is defining DC horror stuff. So
yeah, the irony of it was that we saw Barbara Randall that day, and I'm pretty sure she edited that book.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Really?
That sounds a good one. Everybody's hanging out. Everybody, yeah, it's you can meet Tommy Wiseau and also.
Yeah, that is true. True. He was just right there.
Yep.
And
I met at the one we went to 5 years ago. So.
And so is Billy Zane.
Weird.
Just right there.
Right.
Just hanging out at somebody's booth. Just that's where he is.
Because they all live there. It's LA.
Well, it's also what comic book conventions used to be like, and some still are. Again, Baltimore, where you'd hang out with friends or you'd see friends from all over the country, at this one convention, and they would say like, "Hey, have you read, Blankety Man yet?" "No." "Oh, greatest book ever. You should read it." And you go and you'd find a copy at the convention and you'd read it in your hotel room that night, and you tell the person the next day that they're either completely full of shit or geniuses, and I miss that camaraderie. The conventions have gotten too big, and also, there are fewer comic books being sold at conventions. It's now mostly strange tchotchkes and swords and chainmail.
Well, sometimes it's good,
which is weird.
There's something for everybody. And, people who, I like that. My thing is, there needs to be enough of everything. Like there should be stuff for people to bring the people that they want to go out for the day or whatever it is with, and go and find things to do while you can go find comics. Like I want everybody to love comics, but that's not going to be ideal. Like,
But a certain percentage of the people who come for chainmail will end up flipping through. Will end up doing this.
Yeah, they will.
30%.
Or they'll end up in Artist Alley, and somebody will say, "Oh, they want to read my book," and they'll end up buying it, and that's good,
They'll come up against the unshaven comics guys, who will force you to buy one of their books, or slaughter you. One of the two.
We love Mark. We love Mark and Mike, Mark and Matt and Kyle. They're part of our family. So, but yeah,
Kyle could sell anything to anybody.
So shows, you're going to be obviously at Chicago. Where else can people find you? Coming up, you doing any?
Yeah, I've got Traverse City, Michigan. I'm going to go take a drive there, do their show. I'm trying to do like more small shows this year. Just my kid is 4 now, and she likes going with us, and so we've been doing small shows. So as many, little places I can drive to in Ohio or Indiana or Minnesota or Iowa. Hey man, let me know. I'll come to your con in those places. And then yeah, C2E2 and the bigger ones this summer. I've got a few. But yeah, C2E2, I'm going all the fuck out. I've got the 20th anniversary of Hackslash,
Excellent.
tons of crazy shit. I got action figures. I got everything. So come and get some.
Like, that's crazy. I mean, that's the other part of it. Like, there are there are Cassie Hack action figures. That is so cool. I think it's cool. You should be proud of it.
Pretty cool, yeah. I don't complain. That's all and at some point in my life, I was like, well, once I get action figures, I can retire. And I was like, oh, no, I can't.
No, not yet, but someday.
But it's still cool. Yeah.
It is cool.
A couple of years ago, I did a show in Kokomo, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis, for those of you who are deprived of maps. And, I was invited, and Mark Fishman spoke very highly of it. And how can you not go to a show called Kokomo Con? And I had this wonderful time out in the middle of, I don't want to say nowhere, but compared to the urban life that I'm used to, it's nowhere. And I've always enjoyed those shows, those smaller shows where you could actually sit and talk with the fans. They can not just ask you questions or be fans, but really get into what is it that you like, what don't you like, what would you like to see, what do you wish would happen. They're very educational experiences.
We actually did a show in Indiana called Hall of Heroes Con, and it's associated with the Hall of Heroes Museum about a month ago, and it was a blast. It was so much fun, and it was a town, not Elkhart, Indiana, not that big of a town,
right?
But yeah, we had a blast. So as much as I can do, little day tripper drive around. I did one in Arizona 2 weeks ago, just like a one dayer. Like, yeah. That shit'll just make you remember the fun, like why you did this, and then you'll have to go do a big show to make up your financials. But
right, and that's a good point. Like, and for people who are watching and people who are like, I kind of mentioned this earlier this year when we were talking, but like, I had gone to Columbus in the early December, and it wasn't until a few weeks ago when I went to Planet Comic Con. So there's like 3 months off, and like I'm not going to shows, and that you miss it, and then when you're in it, you feel home. And there's something about being around comic book creators and people who are watching. I hope you enjoy this. But go talk to people about the comics they make. Talk to them about why. I mean, the first time I met you, and I think that we were talking about Nightwing at one point, and it was when Ben had taken over, and so there was. It was messy because Tom shot him in the head and stuff like that. And, which
that's messy.
Yeah, it was
but like just having that conversation was so wonderful. Just to be able to talk to somebody and that say, I like this thing, I like what you did here, I'm not happy about this, and you were very, very, very understanding. And I find that you will find that with most creators, that people are. Go ahead.
Oh, there's reasonable people mostly, right?
Mostly.
That's right.
Mostly.
Probably the best reason to go to a convention, and this is true for everybody, if you've been in the business for 1,000 years or you're just a new fan, you go to a convention and you may see somebody like Ramona Fraden or Erwin Hasen, and you can sit and talk with them, and they can tell you what it was like and what they feel about what's going on now, and they'll do sketches, all this other stuff. And you're talking about living history, living pop culture history. And I know this is going to sound weird, but the next convention I do, I'm going to miss Ramona.
Yeah.
That's strange, but it's true. When I first met Ramona was in 1976, and I told her I liked her work, and she thought I was hitting on her.
Were you?
No. Oh, the thought didn't occur to me. I'm such a fanboy.
Yeah, I don't know if I said this on air, but like when last year at Baltimore, it was a crazy show. I had like 7 panels to do, and Mike and I were sharing a booth and barely talked the entire time. But the one thing I didn't buy any comics. The only one thing I did do is I bought a couple of sketches that Ramona had done and Todd DeZago had brought to sell. And when we went ahead and started putting up a bunch of putting a lot of the art in frames around the house, and we kind of bought stuff and kind of laid it out. There's two little 6x6 sketches. One's Robin and one is Aquaman and Aqualad, and they're awesome. Like 94-year-old woman making these awesome sketches. And when we put everything away, we couldn't find those sketches, and we thought they had been gone. Like I have a Brenda Starr's strip, but we couldn't find them. And then like when I was away at one point, my wife found them, and so I have them now. And I'm like, that was the hugest thing. Like they're so awesome, and doing that and finding, getting sketches or buying pages and talking to people about them. I bought a couple of pages at the last show I was at, which is crazy, but they're Nightwings on them. they're Tom Rainey outsider pages. But the one of them is actually the actual page that was returned, and there's not a lot on it, but they're like these. It's all vertical, horizontal panels, and it's got John Workman's lettering, like sound effects on it. So that's why I wanted it.
Yeah,
because I'm a nerd.
See, there you go. Go to cons. We're not immortal with the people who make this shit. Come hang out. And then get some stuff and share the hobby. It's
great. The thing about comics is that first of all, they're good for you. You should read more comics. They open your soul. They allow you to expand your mind. It's an easy way to get into somebody else, to get into a story, and there are questions there. Like I was reading a book recently where it was a very, very straightforward story about some, dystopian desert planet type thing, right? Whatever. But there were so many things that were hidden within that, and the way the writer kind of told you these things, or kind of asked the reader to think, if you didn't have to pay attention to it. And that's some of the things that you guys like, some of the things in Local Man that I really like about that as well. And let's be honest, Money Shot, there are things that
hidden in Money Shot.
What?
Lots of things hidden in Money Shot, mostly boners.
Well, there are a lot of boners in Money Shot. Okay. But there are other
not things. As many as in Batman.
That's true. Yeah. That's true, actually.
I don't know. So, but like that's important. That's part of what makes comics entertaining and interesting, and more than just about which Joker is better. Yeah,
lots of personal little human details in there.
That's go read Dark Red, because that is personal details. Really, really good book.
Yes, please read that book. It's probably hard to find now.
It's probably very hard to find now, and there's that's a whole other story. But
maybe I can drag that one over to Image too. Let's see if I can.
I've heard people doing stuff like that.
Yeah, there you go. It's a good thing.
Anyway, I thank you for doing this. I need to call it a night. We're gonna call it a night a little bit early. We brought you in. I appreciate you being here. Please go and buy Tim Seeley's books, and go and read his books, and follow him everywhere. I'm gonna put Paula Seeley's Instagram in the chat, so people should go follow that, because
you should check out my awesome wife and my awesome brother, my awesome sister-in-law as well. My other here, and Tony Fleeks. He's not related, but he's all right too.
He's all right.
It's been great talking with you, and
Mike, always good to see you, man. I have a huge pile of First comics. I have every issue of Warp. I think you should know.
You shouldn't. You just made his day. All right.
Yes. I'm not. That's not fucking around. I've been buying Warp for 20 fucking years. So I'm building an entire run. So there you go.
Well, next time I'm in Chicago, we're gonna have to get together.
Let's go. We'll go back issue. We'll go dump box diving.
My wife calls it dumpster diving.
Oh yeah,
dumpster.
Yeah, and if there's a great Italian beef place near where you live, I'll be there.
I have one of the best.
Oh,
yes. So,
all right. I'm there.
all right.
I'm there.
Listen, guys, thank you so much. Always good to see you. Feel better, Bob.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Wow. So you're like breathing, but just barely.
I'm out of here. I appreciate everybody sticking it out, and I hope I wasn't too bad. I appreciate the comments from Mindy. I'm so glad Mindy was watching. Thank you, Dean, for watching. I appreciate you being here all the time. And we'll see you next week. We'll see you in 3-4 weeks, something like that, up in Ithacon. Next week is gonna be an Ithacon show. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about with Ed about that, about what's going on there. We're also gonna have all right, stop with these things. We're gonna have Zach Quaintance, who is on Twitter as Comics Bookcase. He did a Kickstarter in the pandemic, and you know him. He interviewed you, and he's the guy you know I'm talking about, right, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
Mike? Yeah. He has a new Kickstarter coming out next week. We're gonna have him on the show. Apparently, we're doing that these days, and he's also a journalist, so it'll be fun to have that kind of, back and forth. And then we have some other people lined up for later on this year.
We have some names.
You have some
coming
names
up.
Mm-hmm.
We have some
we do have
real
some
names.
We have some real names, and please stick around, and please make sure you follow and subscribe everywhere, because I'm setting June up to be a really good month for us as well. So we're thinking ahead for that.
All right.
In the meantime, I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah, get some sleep. Take care of yourself. Get some chicken soup. You have a nice Jewish wife. She should be able to get you some chicken soup.
I made pho, so I had that. So
okay.
All right.
Take care, my friend.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all out there in viewer land. I appreciate you putting up with us.
All right. See y'all later.
Take it easy.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com.